Good evening, gentlemen. I'm sure we all had quite a lovely and awesome day. All right, so welcome to tonight's online session. I'm still your host, O.O. Stevens. And tonight we are going to be looking at the topic rules of interpretation. Rules of interpretation in ethics and professional conduct. And we are going to be looking at the major rules of interpretation. But first of all, when we talk about rule of interpretation, we are talking about the principle or the mode that a particular court or a particular judge may employ at interpreting or resolving a matter that is before it. Now, the mode that has been employed by this particular court may be different from the mode that will be employed by the next court. Probably it could even be on the same matter, but they probably would employ different mode of interpreting that matter that is before them. That is the reason why most often than not, a matter can be handled by a particular court. When it goes to a higher court, such a higher court would either dismiss the matter or uphold the judgment. So now, when we talk about rules of interpretation, we have different types of rules. We have the literal rule of interpretation. The literal rule of interpretation posits that where the words of a statute are clear and unambiguous, its ordinary dictionary meaning should be applied. What are we talking about here? If the definition that has been given to a word does not actually create any doubt in the mind of anybody, it does not create any confusion in the mind of anybody, then the ordinary meaning of that particular word should actually be used. For instance, when somebody says that Obi is a male, or when somebody says that her husband, the husband of this person, is male. So ordinarily we know that there is no confusion that husbands are meant to be males, except we are living in a generation whereby women can be husbands in the case of lesbians. So, but if there is no confusion in the mind of the court as to whether this particular man is indeed a male or is indeed male, then there is no other way, or there is no other way of interpreting what is who the man is, if not interpreting, or if not interpreting the man to indeed be a male. So once the word of a statute does not in itself invoke any iota of confusion, that is what we say, if it's not ambiguous and if it is clear enough, then the ordinary dictionary meaning shall be applied. Now, what about the golden rule? This rule is to the effect that where the application of the ordinary meaning of a statute would cause harshness or absurdity, then the court shall apply the golden rule to avert such harshness. So where applying what the law has said is going to be very harsh to somebody else, then you are going to apply the golden rule of interpretation to avert such harshness. For instance, with this issue of lockdown and curfew, probably the court had already said that nobody should go out once it is 8 p.m. That is curfew, so it's a total lockdown. Then probably my wife went into labor around 11 p.m. and I needed to take my wife to hospital. Then I had to drive my wife. So as I was driving my wife, the police caught me on the way that I have breached the curfew that was placed in place. And I was telling them that my wife was indeed or is indeed in labor and she needs medical attention. Now, if this matter comes before the court, if the court looks at the circumstance and the court knows that coming now to imprison this man or to fine this man for breaching the curfew is going to be harsh, because the circumstance for which he has breached that particular curfew rule or rule of curfew was actually justifiable in itself, then the court will now apply the golden rule. And the golden rule is not going to find that man liable or guilty, because if the literal rule is applied, that is, if it is applied the way the law said it, then if it is going to be harsh, then that particular golden rule is going to be applied. That is what we mean by golden rule. Now, what about mischief rule? This is the rule permitting the court to go outside the letters of the law in order to ascertain the problem, that is the mischief that the law has come to cure. For instance, there may probably be a law against rape. And it could be possible that when this particular law against rape was actually made, was owed to the fact that somebody probably raped a girl, that is, slept with somebody without the person's consent, and maybe slept with that person until the person died. So that ordinarily could have given a reason why maybe the National Assembly will now maybe advocate for a bill to now curb the incidence of rape in the community or in the society. Also, for instance, now the law known as Robbery and Firearms Act was actually found, or was actually established during the time of Anini in Nigeria. So when it was so rampant that these Anini or armed robbers were everywhere, killing people, shooting people, so the National Assembly now enacted the Armed Robbery Act. Now that Armed Robbery Act now is to the effect now that the reason why it was enacted was because of the rampance or high rates of armed robbery and killing of people. So now the judge who is to apply a mischief rule would ordinarily not bother itself with what the law has said. The court will not bother itself with knowing what was in place, what was happening, what was the problem, what was the wrong that was in place that gave the rise to this particular law. So that is the mischief rule. So the judge is interested in the mischief that this particular law came to cure than the law itself. That is the mischief rule. Because understanding that will now actually help at knowing how he or she is going to apply the judgment of the court. Now we have the ejus dem generis rule. The ejus dem generis rule. This rule is to the effect that where a specific word or where specific words are used and such specific words were followed by a general word, that general word would be interpreted to be in the same class as those specific words. Now what this means is, for instance, if I said goat, I said dog, and all other animals should be placed in the cage. Now we know that goat and dog are mammals. They are animals that breastfeed. So goat and dog are specific words. They are specific. And when I say and all other animals, that and all other animals should not be interpreted to be in the class of mammals. So that and all other animals is not going to include the class of snakes. It's not going to include the class of lizards. Because the ejus dem generis rule say that when specific words have been used, the specific words now is dog and goat, and that specific word was accompanied by a general word. That general word here is and all other animals. Now that general word is now going to be interpreted to mean the same as the class of those animals in the specific word. So and all other animals now is now going to be interpreted to mean the animals that are in class of mammals. So that means cow. That and other animals can now mean cow. It cannot mean any other type of animal that can ordinarily breastfeed. That is the rule of ejus dem generis. So when the law ordinarily sees things like this, or when the court ordinarily sees things like this, if the court decides to interpret it by the rule of ejus dem generis, the implication is that any other word that follows a specific word will be interpreted to be in the class of those specific words. Now we have the expressio unius est exclusio alterius. I'm aware that we know about this. Expressio unius est exclusio alterius. This rule posits that an express mention of one thing is the exclusion of another thing that is not mentioned. So what we mean here now is, if you said that the students of Nigerian Law School Abuja campus should be seated before the arrival of the DG, the implication is that it does not involve the students of Nigerian Law School Lagos campus. It does not involve the student of Nigerian Law School Kano campus. It is only the student of Nigerian Law School Abuja campus. So it has been expressly stated that the students of Nigerian Law School we're talking about here are those in Abuja campus. So if we have expressly mentioned Abuja campus, that means it has excluded Lagos campus. It has excluded Kano campus. It has excluded any other campus except Abuja campus. But if you say the student of Nigerian law school generally, the implication now is that no matter where the person is, so long as the student of Nigerian law school, then he is qualified. It to the exclusion of the students of Nigerian universities. So if you have expressly mentioned the people you are referring to, then it means an exclusion of those that you are not referring to. We have another rule known as lex non cogit ad impossibilia. This rule means that the law cannot command the doing of the impossible. For instance, there is no law that can actually say let a dead person be brought in his corpse to come and be placed in the dock for him to answer to the crime that has been alleged against him. So we know that that is impossible. So the dead man cannot actually stand trial. So that on itself now, those are some of the rules of interpretation that you need to concern yourself with. If any question is ordinarily expected to come out here, just make sure that you appreciate the literal rule, as I have said it, the golden rule, the mischief rule, and the ejusdem generis rule. Those are the major rules of interpretation in ethics that you need to actually concern yourself with. And most of us that actually listen very well in class during our university days, these rules of interpretation will not in themselves be new to our knowledge. But even if this is the first time you're hearing it, just make sure that you appreciate what ought to have been appreciated. And even if you're doing your associative reading, this is going to modulate you properly. Thank you so much, and do have a blissful night rest.